Okay, so
Sweet.
we're
All
hearing
right.
that we have better balance going now.
Cool. All right. So welcome everybody. This is the second, not inaugural anymore, but this our second Riptide Lab Chatcast, and this is Eric Chan, and I'm joined by Jason Waddell.
Hi, we have a camera this time for one of us, but not both of us.
Yeah, just the important people are on camera, or maybe the less important people are on camera. I don't
And
know.
to eliminate some of the dog-based noise, I am recording from the office today. So, uh,
You could have fooled me. It looks like you're in a house, but
oh yeah,
I guess that's just what your office looks
I
like, I
don't know.
guess.
That doesn't look like a house to me, but
Okay. Now that I see the rest of your, boardroom, when I could just see the doorway behind you, then I just assumed that's what your place looked like.
we're on the we have a three-story building, and I'm on the first floor, which is in Europe not ground level. So
Right,
ground floor is
right.
zero,
Zero.
and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
first is the one above that.
yeah.
So yeah,
So what's new in the world of Cube for you?
in the world of Cube, not all that much. So my wife got back from England on Monday, and normally we do cubing on Tuesday,
Yeah.
but she got back late Monday night, and I didn't want to be like, oh well, welcome back, honey. I'm gonna go play Magic after I get home from work. So
Yeah. That's probably an understandable position. If not, I mean, it's unfortunate, but understandable, I guess.
yeah, I mean, I did get requested by several people from our group to hold a cube this week, but
hmm
it did
hmm
not happen. We'll be back on our regularly scheduled programming on Tuesday.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting the same things from Lucas. Apparently, his group wants another cube immediately, but unfortunately, in the middle of house moving and packing and all that. So I told him I might have to hold off for a good 2 or 3 weeks or so. But
Yeah, but I actually did play a lot of Magic this week, but I played Modern, and I have my
mhm.
first ever Modern tournament uh, tomorrow, and
Okay.
I have a deck fully deproxied, and my big purchase of the week involved a playset of these guys.
Guys, yeah, let's
No,
let's
no,
see
no,
them all.
no! Look at the
Oh
camera.
wow! Holy
Yeah,
crap!
yeah. So I
Wait, a
I am
place.
now a Goif carrying
Oh my
Magic
goodness.
player.
I mean, I think as
Yeah,
recently as 2 days ago, you were fretting about whether to use plated GOP or something or other to slot into the two drop.
yeah. So I have a friend who's a legacy player, and he is uh, well, he's kind of selling a lot of his collection, and
Yeah,
so I was able to get a playset of
that's
Goifs and some Romans and a few Snapcasters for like
okay. Yeah,
350 euros.
that's yeah. I mean, just for the playset of Goyfs alone, that sounds like a really sweet deal.
Yeah, so I'm not upset with that at all.
I
Uh,
think when I got my Goy for Cube, I remember ordering it online for $60 American at the time, and I thought I was getting, ripped to, to All Kingdom Come, and I realized it was just after that, about a year later, I realized it's just on its a uh, one-way track up, and
yeah,
wasn't
I
in.
mean, if it getting reprinted didn't affect its price in a negative
Yeah,
way, then
yeah, that's true, eh? Yeah.
I figure you might as well buy in now. It's
Yes.
not going down.
Yeah, there are a lot of staples which I regretted paying so much for at the time. I think another one was Muda Vault, and I don't know, that one might have gone down because of the M14
Well, it
reprint.
got real reprinted this time. Yeah.
Yeah. That was the actual, Corset standard legal reprint. So that one might have dropped a little. I'm not really sure, but
Yeah, I feel like a
I
big
don't.
idiot for
Mhm.
not buying playsets of
Fetch,
fetch lands when they
fetch
were in
land.
standard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird to think that the eternal demand for them, like I guess now like 3 years later after they've been
Exactly.
printed, is so much
Yep.
higher than the standard demand
Yeah.
was. I mean, it speaks to the growth of the game as a
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah. I wonder if this is all modern because I'm sure Legacy. Well, maybe it wasn't a huge thing, but I mean, Legacy was already a thing back then, and they were still $10 to $12, and now I guess I don't know. Is it that modern is a much bigger thing now than Legacy,
Yeah, I
which
wouldn't
is
be surprised if EDH plays into that also. I mean,
mm,
that's
yeah.
also people
Yep.
feeding into demand for eternal cards.
Yeah. whenever there's a like a quote unquote casual card that's like $15, I just ask Calvin. It's like, do you guys use this in EDH? Because I don't know what this card does, and it doesn't seem that good. But it's like there's like one like Mirror in the Moaning Well. I wanted to get it for my utility land pile, and it's like $7. And I don't know what that card does in any format, so I have to assume it's EDH, I guess.
Yeah.
Scalding Tarn, yeah.
Yeah, these
Yeah.
things have started to explode. I mean, if you see like here, and then around here, I wrote my article recommending double fetch lands in Cube.
Sure.
So yeah, this is all my fault, guys.
So direct correlation, you're saying? Yep. I mean, you are the statistician. You would be able to tell us about that.
Yeah, okay. So no Cube for you this week?
Oh, hold on. I don't know if my Twitch died. Are people still seeing it, or is that just me? I'm sorry. That's some technical difficulties on my end.
People still seeing Twitch?
Okay. I think it's coming back. We had a cube on Monday, and yeah, we had a good 10 people turn up, including one guy who was fashionably late, and we did the Moto style random picks for him, and
Okay,
he
I've never done
was.
that before. But you had
You
enough
know,
faith that he was going to just show up. If people are running late, I tend to
yeah.
assume that
Well,
they're just
we
not coming.
figured the worst case would be that he didn't come, and then we'd have a pile of random cards which we just didn't use. But I don't think I've done a 10-man in a long, long, long time, and I guess with 10 people, everything just takes a little longer. You have to wait for 10 people to assemble. You've got to wait for the rounds to go until the last match finishes. You've got to wait for deck building, and everything seems to take a little longer. And we're already running well behind schedule, so I figured we had 9 people sitting there, and I say twiddling our thumbs figuratively, but really we were just chatting it up. But one guy pointed out he had to leave in like 2 hours time. So I'm like, I'm going to make the call here. We're going to give this guy Moto style picks. And he was, as you might expect, aghast when he came and saw 18 cards that he had not picked, assembled for him. But, in his defense, he put together a pretty decent playable pile.
That's
He
good.
had he probably had the most duels out of anybody. He had a nice 4-color, very zooish, like with step links and I think
Well, when you start off with
he had a
18
very
random cards, you kind of have to
yeah
deal with what
four
you
four
have, play to
colors
your
four color
strengths.
step 4-color step links aggro. I think is what he had, and it was actually surprisingly playable. Like we had a pretty close 3-game encounter before I took it, but he put up a good fight considering he missed all of his first pack and part of his second pack.
Yeah, I'm the only one in my group that uh, has the courage to run 4-color aggro, but it's a deck when it comes together.
Yeah, I guess you have to prioritize your fetch lands and things like that appropriately. I can't imagine. I can imagine it being a train wreck if you take the aggro cards first and hope for the fetches and duels to come around. Would that be
Yeah,
accurate?
yeah. I mean, they're pretty important to uh, getting the deck together.
Mhm. Oh, okay. Can you give me a second? You know what it is? I think my whole computer has died. So
Your
I'm
computer
I'm
died.
luckily I'm luckily on my iPhone, but unfortunately I'm not recording the audio anymore as I thought I would be, and I'm not actually on the Twitch channel. I can't see anything, so I am going to. We can just keep chatting here, but
Hmm.
yeah. Um, but I guess yeah, if we're gonna field questions, you'll probably have to load them up because I won't be able to. I'm looks like I'm offline temporarily for a second.
Okay. Yeah, I've got my water here, so
Mhm.
uh, I'm channeling Travis Wu stream style. You guys
I
don't have to worry. The shirt is going to stay on.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh, so
so
I've never actually watched his streams. Does he have like a webcam of himself in the corner
yeah,
when
so
he?
here's a webcam, and it usually starts off like full screen, and this is the beginning of a Travis Wu style stream, as it's
Mhm.
like, well, I would have to have my shirt off, but it's him like pouring himself water with his shirt off, and you kind of see his midriff, and then
Okay.
eventually he sits down and adjusts the camera up to his face
Mm,
and other
I
things.
see. I wonder if that's for the ladies in the audience. Is that his intention to
No,
broaden
I
his
think that's
demographic?
just Travis Wu. I think that's it.
That's just his signature, I guess. It's it's like him hulking out or whatever.
Yeah.
He needs some kind of signature like in
Well, he's
wrestling.
really into like fitness and that kind of thing.
I did notice that. Yeah, yeah. Like he's into,
He's a
like
basketball trainer.
okay. Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
Is that his full-time occupation, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think he teaches at a school, like
Hmm.
some sort of middle school team or something, and then also does other basketball
Okay.
things on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Rob said that he asked a question in the other thread. I kind of gathered the various questions here into
Yeah,
a
cool.
document, so I have things ready. I'm going to start
Okay.
off with uh, what I thought was one of the more interesting questions by Scrap,
Yeah.
who says, topic-wise, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on where the Cube community can go as more people sober up from Power Maps. I'm
Hmm.
fairly new to the format, but it didn't take long to get sick of winning with Ancestral Recall.
Yep.
What cool design spaces are out there that are unexplored and interesting?
Yeah.
Uh,
That's a fantastic and a very deep question. That-
yeah. So what are your thoughts on this, Eric?
Oh man, I was hoping to let you go and start, but
Yeah, so anyone who's followed my articles knows that I've kind of railed against Power Maps and using that as a design philosophy, and I still stand by that, but I've got some modifications to it. Um,
mhm.
we're going to go off on a bit of a tangent and work our way towards the topic. So they released the Hearthstone beta, which is like a Blizzard
Yeah, yeah.
collectible card game type of
Uh-huh.
thing. And like imagine if I told you, oh, all the cards in Hearthstone are really powerful.
Hmm.
Like, would that mean anything to you? Would
Right.
that make you be inclined to play the game?
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be my first thing. I'd be curious if it would be fun to play and if it would have good interactive gameplay. But yeah, the power of the cards, I mean, being all relative would not mean a lot to me as an outsider.
Yeah. At the same time, I think there's a sweet spot for power level for most
Yeah,
games.
yeah.
And stop me if I've said this on stream before. Um,
Hmm.
but for example, the first Halo game had what would be with its pistol a three-shot kill, and a
Okay.
lot of people would modify the weapons to be more powerful or something, could do one-shot kill, and
Hmm.
it just wasn't that much fun. Like when the battles had less to them, less maneuvering, less
I see.
they had less depth to it. It was kind of like whoever shot first, and
Yep.
it became really campy,
Yep.
and
Sure.
the power level of it was such that, well, the gameplay became less fun.
Hmm.
So there's obviously not
Yeah.
an inherent tie to that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but I think uh, for me the sweet spot for Magic's power level is much higher than um,
Yeah.
what you would find in a retail draft or even what you would find in standard.
Hmm.
And part of that was it's a concept that I'm going to be writing about in a upcoming article about decision density. And I showed this while I was
Hmm.
streaming
Yep.
a Popper tournament a couple weeks ago. But we have here just like a Louis Scott Vargas opening hand from a Rise of Eldrazi draft deck.
Hmm.
And, this is a perfectly keepable hand. It does things. He'll be able to be competitive in the game. But there's not really like any decisions that are going to be made with this. And these are
Hmm.
all low power cards. And part of it is that, um, the basic rules of Magic are that you start with 7 cards and you can play 1 land a turn.
Yep.
So based on what your curve is, you will or will not really have meaningful decisions to make.
Hmm.
And if I think of starting with a legacy hand where maybe I have a fetch land and an island and a delver and a daze and a force of
Hmm.
will and a
Hmm.
lightning bolt or something,
Yeah.
I have a lot of decisions on how I want to play that out, what I want to keep up, and I'm interacting from the first turn. And I
Hmm.
think part of the issue is that, um, so obviously in the beginning there were a lot of high power cards that didn't really that weren't really that much fun to play with,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
weren't really where they wanted to be. And now Wizards, when they make a set and they talk about constructed, they talk about pushing
yep,
cards.
yeah,
And the takeaway that I get from that is that, obviously they want higher level Magic to be more fun. Like if you try to get into constructed and it's less fun playing those
hmm
decks than it is the draft decks, then you're not going to spend the
yep,
money to put those things together. So I think
yeah,
they're very conscious of what cards are high power level, and they want
yeah,
those to
yeah.
be very fun cards.
Yeah, and I mean to just jump in for a second there. Yeah, I mean just in the recent years, they've toned down land destruction, and we don't even get Stone Rain or something like Molten Rain anymore. And they've also toned down things like counter spells, and even Mana Leak has been deemed too good. So yeah, so and like you say, clearly Wizards is pushing some areas of the game, and pulling back others that they perceive or they think people perceive to be unfun.
Mhm. Yeah, so the style of Magic that I find to be most fun is like very powerful, very interactive, low
Hmm.
converted mana cost things
Yep.
where, from turn one you're making some sort of decisions. And so what you have on a broad scope is that um, there is some like positive correlation between the power level of the cards that you're playing with and the
Hmm.
fun that you're having.
Hmm.
But there are a lot of cards from Magic's history that just aren't really fun creators.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I think this goes across eras, but yeah, there are just a lot of cards that are powerful in the abstract, and if you're trying to win the game, the right thing to do would be to play with these cards, and they would certainly improve your chances of winning, but I don't know that they would be fun for either side of the table. You might not actually be having fun as you play some of these cards.
Hmm. So in my design, there's kind of like two parallel paths that I'm exploring concurrently. Um,
Hmm.
One is in my traditional cube to really inject it with power in the right places and fun in the right
Hmm.
places, like the Gravecrawler and
Yeah.
Steppling style things, breaking Singleton,
Hmm.
with cards that I find to be fun and deep and interactive.
Hmm.
Uh, and the
Yeah.
other is the Eldrazi Domain Cube, which tries to really start things from the uh, as a set that hopefully follows Wizards' good design principles.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and and as I've gotten into it, I realized that a lot of the fun from my original cube was playing with these Thoughtseize and Snapcaster and
Yeah.
uh, all these cards that do a lot of different things and have a lot of interactions with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Well, for one, to get back onto his question,
Hmm.
um, so part of it takes it as people sobering up from power max.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think at this point there's just so much inertia, and even among the local people, not necessarily people who play my cube, but people at the local game store. When I tell them about what my cube is about, they just kind of stare at me and say, "Well, that's weird. Cube is a singleton format," and this was an actual argument from someone at my store, and I didn't bother engaging him because I had better things to do. But I think people have just a fundamental misunderstanding. I can cube is not a format. I mean, each individual cube is its own format, and it's up to the designer to design their format however they want. And cube inherently, there's nothing about it that makes it singleton. But I think there's
Hmm.
just so much inertia towards both singleton and towards power max that at this point, even people who don't actively cube have an idea of what they think cube should be, similar to what people think EDH should be, even if they don't play. Or in EDH, it's a little more clearly defined. There are deck building constraints, but I think people see it in the same way, in that cube is a 360 or 720 card power maxed singleton format, and the only choices you have really are powered or versus unpowered, and I think it is difficult to get people to kind of broaden their horizons on that front. It's an uphill battle just because that's how Cube has been for like well over 5 years now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, cube is a format that is defined by by the two ends, which would be nostalgia and novelty, the
Sure.
novelty of playing with such high-level things. And
Yeah,
I
sure.
think those two concepts carry a lot of weight, especially for people who don't cube very often.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, I think for the general public, if they play cube once every time that the Moto cube comes out, or once or
Yeah.
twice,
Right.
that's probably not enough to get tired of it. And you probably, especially if you play a lot of competitive Magic,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
you probably enjoy the break from always trying to break the format and do your best and
Right.
earn whatever qualifying points you're going for.
Yeah.
But obviously there's a lot to be gained by doing it differently. I have a lot more
Mhm.
fun. Uh, Probably everyone will say this, but I have a lot more fun playing my cube than a random
Mhm.
Power Max cube.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't mean to disparage the other cubes that I've played, but I have to say I enjoy my cube more than the other couple of local cubes I've played and or birded and watched other people play. And I like Rob's comment about curated draft set. I just don't know that it's caught on at all. And maybe there are some cube communities or just Magic communities in general that are more progressive than others and have gotten that idea. But certainly here, I don't think that's the case. I think it's definitely still very much a all the most powerful cards from the history of Magic, and even things like my cube with its modern restriction would kind of get a weird stare because that's already very non-traditional because it's all about vintage legal cards or at least legacy legal cards
So
and things like that.
why exactly do you have the modern restriction?
You know, I started off as something of a budgetary restriction because I started playing around Lorwyn and I happened to have cards from
Hello? Uh-oh. Did we lose Eric?
the yeah, yeah, I'm sorry.
You cut out for a minute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think because I'm on my phone. Yeah, I was gonna say I started off. I started playing like around Lorwyn, and then so I had cards from Lorwyn era on forward, and then it just made sense to make it modern legal for budgetary reasons. But then I think I realized that I kind of liked the modern design aesthetic, the way that Wizards designs cards in the modern day, and that isn't really true like that doesn't apply until maybe Shards or Zendikar forward, and so you have some weird eighth edition and like Mirrodin era cards. But I figure if it's good enough for their modern legal format,
Oh crap, Eric.
oops, sorry about that. I being on the iPhone makes it a little more difficult to not get interrupted by actual phone calls. But I figure I see modern cube kind of I see it as another analog. Well, I guess I see powered cubes as being the analog for vintage, and unpowered cubes as being an analog for legacy. And I figure there's design space for at least a third pillar, with that being modern.
Hmm. Yeah. All right, Eric, you need to get your phone or whatever you've got going sorted out.
I'm sorry. I'm getting about four phone calls, and it's difficult to decline them. But what I'm trying to say, and I before I get cut off again, is that I think maybe there's room for like another pillar of a type of cube anyway, with that being modern. And I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I know that I'm enjoying it. And you do lose a lot of kind of the fun cards, from the older era of Magic, but then you also don't have to worry about some designing around some of the more busted cards. So
Well, I mean, you can
it's
just choose not to run them, right?
yeah, it's true. I mean, I guess it's the same way where people don't run, things like Moxes and Black Lotus. But as it is, I'm kind of happy with the modern restriction, and it's funny because just on Monday, the like we had someone who's an experienced cuber, and I think he owns his own cube, and I hadn't met him before, and
Hmm.
so before the cube, he was peppering me with all sorts of questions about how exactly my modern cube works, and he asked for a list, so I showed him my cube tutor list, which he was perusing before the actual draft. And then by the time we met in round three, he was like, drafting a modern cube is just like drafting a regular cube. And I'm like, yeah, it's not actually all that different. I mean, there might be some of the uh, really broken cards you don't get, but like fundamentally your draft strategies are the same. And there might be one or two archetypes that.
Yeah. So Eric popped out again. I guess my opinion
Okay.
on it is that
Yeah.
if you're running, I mean, it's essentially like a constrained optimization problem, right?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
if you think of your cube goal as maximizing the fun of the cube,
Hmm.
then you've set some constraint there. And as with all optimization problems, you don't know if you're hitting the global max or if you're just hitting the boundary of your parameter space. Does that make sense in a nerdy way?
Yeah. Sorry, I appear to have dropped out, and this is kind of embarrassing, but I'm having all sorts of technical difficulties today.
You know. So my question was, so you're running modern, which is kind of a constrained optimization problem,
Hmm.
um, and in the mathematical sense, anytime you set some constraint,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily know if you're hitting the global max or if you're just hitting the
Hmm.
boundary of your parameter space. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly do you think is gained by setting that restriction as opposed
Yeah.
to uh, letting yourself do whatever and then just picking the cards that you want from the eternal card pool.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. And it could be that there is more to be gained by opening up to the entire card pool that's available in Magic. I guess I haven't really explored that front, and I guess I'm happy with where the Modern Cube is now, and I think there are cards that I can tell are more fun, or things like, at least here, things like Squadron Hawks, which I don't know if they would be really viable. And it could be that I'm hitting the local max, like you said, and there's more net fun to be had if I open up the card pool. But I feel like I've gotten good, at least, at designing around the modern restrictions, and it could be there's a bigger area to explore. But I feel like I've kind of carved out this niche here, and the people again seem to be adapting to the modern constraint, and I think there's something to be said about that, where I'm losing less and less of my
Sorry everybody for the technical difficulties. Um, I guess Eric needs a real computer and not to be calling in from a phone. Okay, he says he has to answer a phone call that he's getting. So yeah, that's one of the downsides of doing these things live, that life can interrupt. Um, so my retort to Eric would be, and I'll tell him this, I guess, after the cast, is that when he talks about there being a third pillar of cubing, you have the powered, unpowered, and having modern, I suppose. Uh, is that it seems weird to define it as a pillar because it's still in theory buying into the old way of thinking. Like basically the difference between a powered and an unpowered cube is that they set some absolute like power ceiling on their cards, and then they apply the same design philosophy afterwards. So an unpowered cube will say, okay, we're not going to run these cards, and then we're going to power max after that. Um, Whereas a modern cube might, uh, you're just setting the ceiling somewhere else where you say we're not going to run the cards that aren't modern, and then in theory those start out by. I mean, it seems like the only reason to set a restriction, a hard restriction, is to enable yourself to do kind of lazier designing, in the sense that, like, if I were to restrict to modern and then power max and say that's more fun, Um, it is true that you've cut out the broken cards, but you could achieve the same thing or better by just uh, applying design standards. Are you here, Eric?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just rejoining now. I think that's a fair, that's a fair assessment of things. It could be that I don't know if it's just that I've invested so much and I feel like I understand, what designing around the modern restrictions are all about now, and I feel like my group has adapted to that. And I guess there's something to be said for opening up to the entire card pool, and like you said, applying good design principles to that. And I don't know if I'd call it laziness at this point, or just maybe the fact that I've sunk so many costs into designing a modern cube that I don't really feel like turning it around now and
Mm.
opening up to the rest of the card pool. I think you asked some good questions I'd never really try to address myself when diving into my modern cube design. But yeah, I feel like at the same time I don't know if it's too late to turn back now and to start from scratch, as it were, or to open it up. But yeah, I guess the thing is my group seems to like have adapted to it, and so I'm kind of, I don't want to pull out that advantage
Mm.
from under their feet. But yeah, it could be that there's more to be gained from opening up to the card pool. I think what's more likely is I'll probably design a second cube, kind of like your Eldrazi domain cube, and kind of come up with a custom set of restraints as opposed to a wizard's format, um, that sort of constraint. So I yeah, I mean, these are some hard questions you're asking that I haven't really thought about, but I think you bring up some good points.
Yeah, so Strap asked, he made a clarifying statement where he's saying that maybe you can do things differently if your power level threshold is different. This is one of the ideas behind the Eldrazi cube, is that in that cube we have, by design, we have to include these Eldrazi spawn token producers, and those are naturally not the highest power level cards, and so we kind of have to design around that power level, and that opens up all sorts of different cards and interactions and um, cute cards that you wouldn't be able to play elsewhere. Um, and so part of it is like, what are you trying to do with the cube? And I think that there's just a ton of design space here. Like with my cube, with the Eldrazi cube, like I started out saying that I want to do some token and creature based ramp, and I said, what else can we do with that?
Hmm.
And the spawn tokens can be sacrificed to turn on Morbid, and then there are other things that interact with Morbid, like Echo and
Hmm.
Fading and Evoke, and so I kind of riffed off and made a whole web of different mechanics and ideas that work together, some of which aren't directly overlap, but there's some connection throughout all of that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of room there. If you think about what is constraining the variability in your design, one is singleton. There's only so much that you can do um,
Hmm.
under singleton. And I don't know if it directly applies here, but there was a conversation that Luis Scott Vargas and some other people were um, having on Twitter where they were all saying that they found the triple large set drafts to be more fun than,
Yeah.
say, two large set and a small or full
Hmm.
block drafts.
Yep.
Um, and triple large set is the least singleton of those. So you'll have about two and a half
Right.
copies of each common in a draft
Right.
pool,
Right.
and you can really work around certain
Hmm.
synergies and things that are going on there. And if you think
Yeah.
about uh, some of the draft sets people really
Yeah.
love, like
Yeah.
Rise or Triple
Yeah.
Innistrad.
Right. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, I think to build off of that, I think like I like the idea with your Eldrazi domain cube is that you're taking a lot of the fun parts from I guess Rise of the Eldrazi, between the Eldrazi spawn and then the actual ramp package, and then trying to build off that and incorporating all sorts of different elements. And I think that's an interesting way to go about building a cube, is by starting with the cards at the power level that you want, and then surrounding that with various other cards from interconnected archetypes that
Mhm.
that wouldn't just overshadow that in power level, and then building around that and using that as a constraint. And I think that's also an interesting way to go about it. And like you said, that's probably the best way to go about designing a cube that isn't about power max is by starting with the cards and archetypes that you want to build around and going from there.
Hmm. Now, Scrap asked a really interesting question at the end of his second paragraph,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
where he talks about like tweaking toughness and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
what if one or two toughness is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
something that I tried to um, originally bake into the Eldrazi cube, is having a
Mm-hmm.
one toughness, like a high density of one toughness
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So
And
that'd be the
ideally,
critical. Yeah.
yeah, ideally I had this thought that I wanted for, say, Gutshot to be playable in
Okay.
that
Or
cube.
yeah, or like something like Cunning Spark Mage to be an all-star maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to, one of the things is that it gets really difficult to draw the line between interaction and hate card.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
um,
Maybe a pinger would be too good. Yeah.
yeah, or something like, say, Curse of Death's Hold, which might
Okay.
really
No.
work
Yeah.
great and constructed as
Yeah.
a safety valve, but
Exactly.
you don't necessarily want to say to someone, okay, you're never going to get spawn tokens again.
Yep. Yeah. You just
Or,
can't play Magic anymore. Yeah.
or say something like Electrickery, where you wipe, you know, their board for 2 mana and keep your board intact.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so these things are, they're actually really difficult to implement well, and I think it's something that maybe historically cubing hasn't had much of an appreciation for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was on in another community, I was talking about things that I didn't like, and you know, the response from one of the posters was like, well, if someone didn't like something about their cube, they would just take it out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm trying to add more depth to it or create a new dynamic that works well, it's not a question of just like taking out a card that I don't want. Like for me to implement a in a good way, something where one or two toughness or having three toughness is really important because it gets around the
Yeah.
removal in your
Exactly.
format.
Yeah. Exactly.
That takes a lot of work and a lot of iteration.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the big bottleneck is design time and playtesting time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, I was just gonna say I was just in the midst of wondering whether I should try and catalog in my own cube like what the toughness of all my creatures is and how many I have at 1 and 2 and so on. Because I've thought about it and I think Gutshot is probably actually just playable in my main cube in my modern list because I think there are actually a ton of creatures with 1 toughness that are really good utility creatures. I mean, like Bob comes to mind, and there's going to be like Young Pyromancer soon, and I've got things like Blood Artist, which are really annoying if you can't get it off the board. And the more I think about it, the more I think even in normal cubes, Gutshot might be surprisingly playable, and it's just probably a matter of like tallying it up and seeing what the critical toughness is in even all of our actual cubes. And figuring out whether something like Gutshot or even a Shock. And I think in my cube, Shock, again, is surprisingly playable. I know I've had a clamoring of people um, telling me to switch that out for Bolt, but I still see people main decking that, and I don't think it's wrong in my list. I don't think it's wrong to have that um, there as, you know, a pseudo removal slash burn spell.
why do you
And
have
it's
it
just
that way?
the Shock, or
Yeah.
well, I was under um, I was putting my cube under, you know, a reconstruction project where I was taking out a lot of the powerful cards, and that included both powerful creatures and some of the powerful removal. And so at that point, Bolt got the cut, and Shock came in to replace Bolt. And I know I've got people telling me that Bolt isn't too powerful, but as long as, you know, people main deck Shock, and again, I don't think they're wrong when they main deck Shock, and as long as they keep it there, I think it's a perfectly viable card to have in cube.
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean,
question less of viability and more of like do you have some design rationale other than you wanted to remove some high power card?
yeah, well, I wanted to remove some of the high power removal, and like I was taking things out like Path and Dismember, Go for the Throat, and there's probably more in that list. And I was trying to see if that would help the aggro and tempo decks a little more, and it seems to be playing out that way. It seems to be that Path is obviously equally good on against creatures on any end of the spectrum, but it was being primarily used against the cheaper creatures, and it could easily be used on an Elash Norn. But then now I've got things like Crib Swap, which again are equally good against your 7 mana bombs, but are a lot less effective against your Goblin Guides and your Rakdos
Yeah,
Cacklers and things like that.
I'm going to say that I think you're wrong here. Um, so you made a really good post once about the cost of your removal, and I
Yep.
think if you're trying to help out aggro, the
Hmm.
direction you want to go is say replacing Doom Blades with Murders, that type of thing. But given that
Yeah.
we have a 1 mana burn spell,
Hmm.
like if you make it a 2 damage spell, that's
Yep.
going to be, it's still going to take out all the aggro creatures. What it no longer hits is like the Olivias, these mid-range creatures that have 3 toughness and these types of things. And Shock
Hmm.
is also less effective in ending the game for aggro. So what you get with Shock is a burn spell that's still really good against aggro,
Yeah,
and that's
Jason, give
less
me a sec.
effective.
Give me a sec here. I need to put you on hold, but I'll be
Yeah.
right back.
So for the audience, Shock is still good against aggro, and it's less effective in aggro. Um, so I don't really buy the logic here of improving aggro. Um, yeah, I mean Burst Lightning is another angle. I mean it benefits the decks that can get to 5 mana. So an aggro deck might not be able to take advantage of that. Um, and one of the things that I've seen in the Eldrazi Cube is that you can really tweak what's going on by what type of removal you have. And part of what I did there was to try to support different themes with the removal. So like there's a couple Tragic Slip, there's a couple Tribal Flames, there's a couple Volt Charge. Um, and all of these are
Hmm.
kind of playable on their own, but really get kicked up a notch in decks that can leverage that type of interaction.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I had to put you on hold about halfway through your argument, but yeah, I'm finding with Bolt out, like I do need to put in more burn cards that would actually be helpful to the aggro decks. And so for a while I was running things like I think Lava Spike and even like Needle Drop and things that I figured would help the aggro decks in their burn plan and things that could go to the Dome Well. And I mean, I found Lightning Bolt was being taken as much by the control decks as it was by the aggro decks. It wasn't necessarily being picked up by, the red deck.
But I would
That was,
expect Shock to get taken more by the control decks than aggro
yeah.
decks.
Well, and that's entirely, I've budgeted for that. So I figure Shock is more of a card that will go to, the player who wants to remove small creatures. And then I budget for that by putting in, maybe an equivalent spell that would be better for the aggro decks. And I found in practice Lightning Bolt, obviously is good in the red aggro decks and it's good if it goes to them, but it was just as often being swept out by the guy who was taking Pyroclasm and Slagstorm and Firespout and would, happen to snap up a Lightning Bolt. So I think for me anyway, it's just a matter of where I've set my power ceiling, and for now I've excluded Lightning Bolt along with like 45 other cards I think in my list of cards that I feel are too powerful for my cube. So that one just happens to be there, along with a whole host of other really good cards. And I don't I don't. I mean, I'm certain that my cube could handle it if I were to throw it back in, and it wouldn't greatly upset the balance to upgrade a Shock to a Lightning Bolt. But again, I guess it's just a matter of dialing down the cheap universal removal, and that's kind of what I've been doing. And I've been happy with the results so far. I think you're right in that Bolt is different than something like a Path, where Path really is just good universal removal, and Bolt is multifaceted. But I that's one I probably would put back in if I start dialing the planeswalkers back up. If I started throwing like a Gideon or a Jace back in, I think that's where I really want the bolts, because those are cards that are really good in control decks, and things like bolts do help to neuter the power of these really dominating planeswalkers a little bit.
Mm.
Okay, I'm back at my desk now, so I'm going to try and read through all this chat. Oh my goodness, got some really good input here.
All right, so we've had actually a lot of conversation on the forums this week on is it stuff on blue red.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I think this was a great question actually from I think from both Rob and Scrap. Yeah.
yeah, well, we also had a discussion on the Splinter Twin combo.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
So what are your thoughts there?
I think things like that, and it's just like in the actual modern format. It really depends on the speed of the format and what people are doing. And if everyone is kind of a mid-rangey dirtly deck, then even just having like one Kikijiki and two targets for it might be too good. And again, that just depends on the density of the removal and the speed of the decks. I think those are the two most important factors in adjusting for whether your cube can handle that kind of combo and whether or not it would be fun and interactive.
Yeah. So to give some perspective, in testing, I have a friend who um, is for whatever reason playing Kiki-Jiki Pod in Modern instead of Melira Pod.
Hmm.
Um, and I played about 20 games against him, and he had a deck that could really, if I ever tapped out, it could seem to win out of nowhere through some obscure
Okay.
chain.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
but
Yeah.
my deck was also, my deck runs, um, you know, depending on whether you're pre or post board, anywhere between 9 and 12 instant speed removal spells,
Hmm.
and I would
Hmm.
still lose to the combo at some point.
Oh, is that true? Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, it was a matchup that the more that we played it, the more that like it started off about 50-50, and the more I knew what his deck was capable of.
Hmm.
Because you really need to know like whether they can go off or what their different lines are, whether you should be, uh, still pressing your advantage or sitting back on a pair of removal spells.
Hmm.
And if you get that timing wrong, things can go badly.
Sure, 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 sure.
Um, but so if you think about um, a Splinter Twin combo, the only way to interact with it is
Hmm.
with instant speed removal,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
yeah, so I mean, like even something really innocuous, like your opponent could go like first two turns forest, and then play things, and then third turn play a fetch land, and
Hmm.
pass the turn, and they can fetch for like steam vents, and
Sure.
then end of turn flash in a guy, and then play a
Hmm.
mountain and win the
Okay.
game. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
think, I had that combo in my cube at one point in time, and if you go on the
Hmm.
Salvation forums, you'll see that I actually started a lot of these threads trying to get more
Hmm.
combo and more Johnny type of things in there, and I
Yeah. I,
don't
I,
think
I
it's
I think I
the
recall
way to
this.
go. Um,
Okay.
like having these types of combos really restricts the type of decks that can exist in your
Hmm.
environment. Like
Hmm.
um, if you were to think about cube decks as a constructed environment where anyone
Right.
could just pick a cube deck and
Yep.
then roll with it, so you could have like
Hmm.
multiple people playing a cube kiki-jiki type of deck,
Hmm.
is that you would quickly suffocate out just like a lot of the green decks, a lot of the
Yeah,
decks
that
that,
that was exactly my feeling. Yeah, like the green decks that don't exactly run a ton of instant speed removal would be the ones that suffer. And then so the only game you'd be playing is the metagaming one where you're picking decks and you know you have some automatic good matchups and automatic bad matchups, and that to me doesn't make for an interesting cube environment where the outcome of the match is almost predetermined before you sit down and roll the dice.
yeah, I mean, it makes me think of Popper Constructed a few months ago before the most recent wave of bannings where there was this Storm combo deck, and basically any deck that couldn't either race it or somehow shut it down just couldn't be played in the
Hmm. Yeah,
environment.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it puts a lot of restrictions on your deck building because the fact that you know that combo is potentially in the environment means that your deck needs to be of a certain speed or faster. And if that is your only way of interacting because you don't have any good instant speed removal, you just have to be a faster deck. And that puts a lot of serious design constraints on what you can do as a deck builder, just trying to plan for the potential of that combo in one of your opponent's decks.
you know, when I think about say something like Birthing Pod or the Gravecaller decks, is
Hmm.
that like you look at a Gravecaller deck and there's a ton of ways to interact with it.
Yep. Yes.
Like
Yes.
you can block their
You
creatures.
can
You can
block it.
try to
That
race
that's
them
always a good
because
one. Yeah.
they can't block. You can gain life. You can uh,
That's true.
all sorts of other things. You can try to
Yeah.
exile their creatures. You can remove
Yeah.
zombies at strategic points in time.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of like basically every deck has some way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've played, if we go to like a more extreme thing, like a powered cube where they quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote support aggro, is that I just
Yeah.
felt like I was
Yeah.
completely punished for playing that archetype because
Yeah.
then the opponent
Yeah.
would like Eureka out Sphinx of the Steel Wind or
Yep.
Channel out or
Mm-hmm.
do some Tinker out of Blight Steel, just something that like
Yep.
there was no way for my red-green deck to
Yeah.
reasonably be expected to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it made me really resent the designers because it's like
Mm-hmm.
they're putting in the cards for me to play some archetype,
Yep.
and then they're also putting in archetypes that I just
Mm-hmm.
can't interact with in any
Yep.
way.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I feel this way even about the unpowered MTGO cube, where I remember putting together some sort of fair deck. I don't remember exactly what. And in both games 1 and 3 of the match, I was on the draw, and my opponent both times had the turn 2 channel into Ulamog. And I just felt like, why did I put $10 or $12 of my real money into this? Like, there was nothing I could have done. Um, Playing my 1 planes and then facing down turn 2 Ulamog. And it just didn't make for good interactive Magic.
You know, so I think um, there's a lot of focus in the cube community on does this archetype or card work,
Hmm. Hmm.
does it win, that type of thing. But
Hmm.
I think you need to step back and decide if that's even what you want to be
Yep.
happening in your
Yep.
environment.
Yep.
I ran for, I think it was only one draft, the Splinter Twin combo, and
Okay.
I drafted it because I knew it was there. And,
Hmm.
there's only so many times you can end step, uh,
Yeah.
test your might, and then untap and win the
Yeah.
game, and just not feel
So
kind of awful
so
about
yeah. So
wasting other people's
even
time.
as the pilot, you were feeling a little guilty about winning and not getting a lot of satisfaction, I imagine, out of your
Yeah,
instant speed.
and it's not even that. So there's another. I mean, there's the spectrum of glass cannon where
Hmm.
you can have glass cannons that are balanced, that don't automatically 3-0, and that's kind of where Channel Ulamog wins. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
you'll have
Sure.
hands that either Channel or Ulamog will be
Right.
terrible
Just
and just
completely
kind
dead.
of,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
where your
Yeah.
deck
And
will just kind of fart
yeah.
around and do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And yeah.
But I don't think it leads to, I've not been satisfied with
Hmm.
watching those games or playing those games.
Yep.
And
So I think it's funny because as much as people want to put combo in their cubes, I think I think the degree to which combo should be prevalent is tricky to address. But I think you may have cracked that, and I don't know if this was incidental or on purpose, but I think your Gravecrawler, sacrifice recursion, um, the black aggro deck is very much an aggro combo deck, and I think I've certainly taken some lessons from that and incorporated more sacrifice elements and ways to abuse the recursion, and I think a lot of people on the forums have as well, and I think that's a direction people should look to, as opposed to going for a pure combo, is something like an aggro combo deck, which is exactly I think what the Gravecaller, Bloodghast recursion with various sac effects like Carrion Feeder or Blood Artist or Blasting Station, what have you, Greater Gargadon. And that plays out, very much on the aggro slash combo end of the spectrum, and it can even within games switch gears from aggro to combo, and like you said, still gives the opponent lots of different lines of interaction, and it doesn't look necessarily like your combo deck. It certainly doesn't have all your blue and red spells, and it doesn't look like Storm, and it doesn't look like Splinter Twin. But I think that's as close as combo to it as you can reasonably get in a cube, while like not just going down unfun
yeah,
paths for gameplay.
people have a bad feeling uh, about decks and plays that win the game that they just can't interact with. Like,
Hmm.
technically there were ways to beat uh, what's that rat in Return to Ravnica?
Pack rat, yeah.
Pack rat, you know, and there were ways to beat
Uh-huh.
Invisible Stalker, but people just
Oh
hated
god.
it, you know,
Yeah, yeah. Like these cards, you either you beat them on the spot and then it goes back to a normal game, or you don't, and then the game just goes off in a totally different direction. That it doesn't feel like Magic anymore.
you know. So Rob had been asking about uh, doing a Spells Matter
Hmm.
theme in Blue Red.
Yep.
Um, and I think there's some issues here that I don't know that I've ever seen them talked about. One of the things that makes say Delver work and constructed that you can't
Hmm.
really achieve in Cube. Well, let's look at a couple
Hmm.
decks here. Is that um, so here's a modern Delver deck, and
Hmm.
we can see that they have a curve that tops out
Yep. At like
uh,
two or
at three. There's two three
is
mana
there?
cards,
Okay, if there's
and
two, like
Snapcasters is kind of like a
yeah,
three drop in this deck, a
that's
three
fair.
or a four
That's
drop.
fair.
So there's a
Yeah.
few things, and they play Blood Moon, so they get up to three on occasion.
Hmm. Okay.
But the fact that they have such a low curve
Hmm.
allows them to cut lands also, and the
Yeah.
result is
Well,
that we get a really high spell density.
yeah,
Like,
and I think the fact that you're running all sorts of filtering cards also lets you cut down on the land. But I agree, yeah, in general with what you're saying.
well, yeah, I mean, you wanna have a high spell density to
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
play.
to trigger your things. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a Delver deck that has um,
Hmm.
25, so more than a third of its deck is
Yeah.
spells.
Stuff. Yeah.
And if I'm gonna pull over a, this is not the best blue-red deck ever, but it is one that has 3-0'd. Um,
Okay.
and we can see that it does run Delver, and you can't really see this here, but it's 17 lands and 10 creatures, which means that
Hmm.
we have 13 cards left over. Two
Hmm.
of those are planeswalkers, so we're down to 11 cards left over. So those are our 11
Yep.
spells. So we have now less than a third
Yeah.
spells.
Yeah. This looks pretty typical of what I think blue-red decks look like. Kind of in the 10 creature range and like 16 or 17 land range. So
You
yeah.
know, so one of the things that you can do to uh, make the spells matters deck work more is to drive down the converted mana cost.
Hmm.
Like if
Yeah.
this deck could have more things down here, like maybe
Yeah.
you're doubling or tripling up on Delver or doing other things, and that we could
Hmm.
cut off the top end and then
Yep.
maybe shave a land or two,
Yeah.
then
Absolutely.
all of a sudden we have much greater spell density. The problem you get a lot of cube decks is that you just can't get a sufficient threat density
Hmm.
to win the game while still having a sufficient spell density to turn on Delver.
Yep. Yeah. Because just drawing 7 spells and no Delver also won't do you very much good. So.
So we have someone, Tritalk, is young Pyromancer in Cube. Yeah, he's in my cube. I haven't updated my cube tutor list yet.
Mhm.
Um, but I think Pyromancer is a strong card. Uh,
Mhm.
and I wrote in my review that it really makes you feel better about playing like Stone Rain or those types of things,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
removal on a
Yeah.
blocker that takes up your
Hmm.
whole turn, and then you still have some velocity going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there are cards like with the spells matters theme in blue red. I think you really want the cards that care about spells to be 2 mana or less. So I think really we're just looking at Snapcaster, Augur, Young Pyromancer, Delver, and maybe there's another one or two. But even something like Guttersnipe, which I tried for a while in my cube, I found to be too expensive already. Having that at 3 mana was a huge deal and made it a lot different than putting something down at 2 that cared about spells. And something like Talran, which I also ran, was just completely unplayable. By turn 4, the game has presumably reached the mid game, and your opponent is doing powerful things, and you're just putting a Talran down. and hoping it survives so that you can untap and play an instant or sorcery, and so that just didn't pan out. So like I think there were some ideas on the forums about using, I think, the Cyclops, Nivix Cyclops or something like that,
Yeah.
and I think there's also, you know, older ones like Wee Dragonauts, and I guess in Rise of Eldrazi there's Killing Fiend, and I think it really depends on the speed and the power level of your cube that you're designing for, because I find in cubes like mine and especially Jason's, I think the speed of the games goes by so quickly that you wouldn't really have time to set up something like a Wee Dragonauts or Nivix Cyclops. And with Kill and Fiend, the difficulty there is that it has no evasion whatsoever, so you're still left with the puzzle of how to get that through without just having it die. Because
And
unlike
Kiln
something like,
Fiend is just terrible. Like, if you don't have a lot of spells being cast, like,
yeah.
it gets played in decks where, like, there was a Pauper Storm deck that would put Wee Dragonauts and Kiln Fiend on and,
Hmm.
cast a
Hmm.
lot of rituals and
Okay.
um,
Yeah, and I
cantrips
guess
and
the
these
problem
types of
is,
things. But
the
you really
problem
had
is
to
you
build the
still,
deck around it to make it worth
yeah.
playing.
Yeah, I mean, you still need to get Kill and Fiend through. I mean, like, unlike Play the Geopede, it doesn't even have first strike, so you can get its power up as high as you want, but it might still get blocked by a Grizzly Bear and not actually do anything of value. So I think it's a tricky thing, like, because I've been trying to get Spells Matters to, to work in my cube for probably half a year, and it's kind of barely a thing right now, even with my Double Delvers and various other things going on. And it's not an easy thing to design for. I think it like you really definitely have to double up on cards that care about spells at the low converted mana cost end of the spectrum. So you probably want double Delver, you probably want double Young Pyromancer. I don't know if you want double. You probably like double Snapcaster. I know. I think CML tried that, and I don't know if that's a bit much, but I
Yeah,
don't
I
know if
don't
double Augur is
dislike
a thing.
having two of them. I mean,
Hmm.
Augur is not really.
Yeah, it's not on
It
the aggressive.
supports. I mean, it works in that deck. I've played it
Yeah.
in. I had another deck somewhere. Let's see. I had a Grixis tempo deck I played
Hmm.
a while back that 3-0'd. Um, and see if I can zoom in here a little bit.
Yeah, that looks like it's,
You know,
and oh.
um, I'm sorry, the
Yeah, so
resolution of this picture is not great.
no, but
So this one
this
plays Augur, and it's happy
right.
to play it, but
Okay. Yeah, yeah. You have a surprising amount of instance, and this looks, it's actually more of a control deck, would you say, or is this? No, this, I guess this is a tempo deck, isn't it?
yeah, I mean,
I mean,
it's
despite the fact it's
not
still
it's
hiding an
not
opponent.
this wouldn't pass as a tempo deck in say modern, and we've
Sure.
got Shriek Maw is kind of a 2-drop, kind of a 5-drop, but we've
Okay.
got three five
Okay.
drops here that are true
Okay.
5-drops.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Nice
yeah,
tempo deck.
I mean, this is kind of the space where cube decks
Uh-huh.
live, and is
Yeah.
that
Yeah. That's true.
unless
They're kind of a hybrid.
they're an aggro, like a pure aggro deck, they're probably
Right.
not as streamlined as their constructed equivalents.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, that's fair. I mean, the majority of your action is still at 1 and 2, and I mean, you're not going all in on the spells matter theme, but it's certainly, yeah. And I've certainly run decks with that exact trio of Delver, Augur, and Snapcaster, and so my deck wouldn't be all about spells matters, so and it wouldn't necessarily be straight up blue red, and I guess that's kind of the benefit is that you can, in this case, splash black or splash white or something like that, or maybe make a rug deck if you're not going all in on the spells matters theme. But yes, like straight up blue-red spells matters. I think to go back to the original question, it's a question of whether it's really even worth it as a player to go that deep, as opposed to just making a good blue-red tempo deck that maybe has some cards that incidentally care about the spells mana theme, but doesn't entirely revolve around it.
yeah, I mean, there's only so many cards in Magic's history that properly reward you for going into
Hmm.
spells like that at the
Yep.
power thresholds that most
Hmm.
traditional cubes are at.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think this is one of those where you probably want to be breaking singleton. I would probably,
Yep.
uh,
Yep.
and if you get enough of it, you can increase the critical mass of support with something like a Rune Chanter's Pike.
Hmm. Oh
But
yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would probably start with double Delver, double Brainstorm to kick the archetype off, and then go
Hmm.
from there.
Yeah, 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 and I think this is very much like the Gravecrawler theme, where it's without breaking Singleton, the Gravecrawler recursion deck wouldn't exist, and I think the same thing might apply here with the Spells Matter theme, where if you don't break Singleton and you don't have like the two Delvers or something like that, it would be really hard to get it off the ground. So if you want to experiment with that, I think breaking Singleton is probably the best way to start, just to gauge whether or not it's a viable deck in your environment.
Um, Curesby, I am missing an antecedent. Are you talking about Young Pyromancer you'd be happy to play in this deck?
In the draft.
Rob? Yeah, I mean this looks like
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
reasonable Young Pyromancer deck.
Oh, he's got 4 creatures in here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I guess that's not lying. Wow. So this is a burn deck, I guess. Like, this is actual like lava spike deck. This could reasonably sport Skullcrack, lava spike,
Yeah.
things like that.
I mean a lot of these things are not actually instants or sorceries, but
hmm Oh,
he
that's
said he
yeah,
had 14. Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I am wondering. Uh,
Rob, I'm gonna call you out. This Sword of War and Peace, a little bit sketchy here.
I don't know about
Your
that.
your your 4
Oh, and
creatures.
the 4 creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be. Does he have anything going on in the land? Yeah, the sword might be a bit hit or miss here.
Yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, I guess, and going back to last week's discussion, I kind of agree. Sometimes I would take a sword and realize I had like 6 creatures to play with, and swords weren't even that good, and so yeah, I don't mean to dredge up that whole discussion again, but yeah, I'm starting to agree with you where swords might not be as good as we all think they are, except against the decks where both of the protections kick in and come into play. But against random deck that doesn't care about your protections, yeah, like
Yeah, I mean elementals are creatures. The problem
they
that you're
are.
gonna
They
get
are.
in a deck like this is that your opponents are still going to be playing creatures, which means that I mean they're still going to be playing removal, which makes your creatures basically into lightning rods for
Mhm.
whatever removal spells they have. Like if you've played no creatures and then you finally play Young Pyromancer, they're going to Doomblade that as fast as they can because they have nothing else to spend that card on.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I am wondering about like it looks like the density of your burn is super high in this cube. And I'm wondering how that affects your aggro balance.
Mhm.
I do like burn. I have a lot of thoughts about
Mhm.
burn in that I think that burn spells really enable red to be uh, the best mid-range color, which I've never really
Yeah.
heard anyone else say before. But when you're playing mid-range, what you want to be able to do is to
Yep.
be the control deck against
Yep.
aggro and be the
Yep.
aggro deck against control. And
Mhm.
burn can
Mhm.
really switch hit really well.
Yes. Yeah, I think Stagger Shock is the, like all-star player in that exact role where it can easily take out, 2 aggressive beaters, or it can just go to the dome twice and play both roles really well. And yeah, I'm finding red is responsible for a lot of the mid-range decks, at least here in my cube,
Yeah.
because of the flexible nature of the burn.
hmm Yeah, but this looks like a pretty powerful deck here.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, there have been questions about designing cube for two-player drafting.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's pretty interesting. I can't say I have a ton of experience in that,
So
but
I,
I
I've
guess
had
I guess we'd be talking about
I've
grid
had an
drafting then.
idea that I've never tested it, but I'm gonna throw it out there and see
Hmm.
how you guys react to it. Um, one of the problems with Magic as a game for two-player drafting is that you have too many colors. Oh,
Yeah.
it's just way too many colors. So
Hmm.
you're spreading two
Like,
players across five
yeah.
colors. You might
Hmm.
not be overlapping or competing for colors at all.
Yeah,
And one thing
yeah.
that happens a
Chances.
lot I mean, grid drafting solves this a little bit by letting you hate draft while you draft for your own stuff.
Hmm.
But when I've played other two-player draft things, you kind of get one player settles into their colors, another
Yeah.
player settles into other colors, and there's
Hmm.
no real interaction at the
Right.
drafting
Right.
phase. So
Hmm.
the idea that I have is when you do a two-player draft to start off, each player bans a color,
Hmm.
and if a card of that color would come up, or even gold of that color, so like let's say that you ban black and green
Sure.
Then if a Blood Braid Elf comes up, you just remove that
Mm.
and put another card in its
I see.
place. So
I see.
you
I
you
see.
have every two-player draft will be just three of the five colors,
Okay.
and
Okay.
you draft it that way.
Hmm.
I almost never do two-player drafting,
Right.
which is ironic because I invented
Uh-huh.
what appears to be the only two-player draft format people are
There
using
are people
anymore.
with yeah, there are people with way more grid draft experience than you out there now.
Yeah, I looked at the comments of the Star City Games ran a
Yep.
article on grid
Yep. Yep.
drafting last week,
Hmm.
and there are all
Hmm.
sorts of people running variants and modifications to grid
Yeah.
drafting
Yeah. Yeah.
or new ways to do it with four players or that type of thing. So,
Right.
there are people out there playing it a lot and tinkering with it. I haven't seen any
Hmm.
too dramatic
Right. Very.
modifications. People seem to like the
Hmm.
basic
Yeah,
mechanics
the
of it.
3x3. Yeah, yeah. I does feel like it'd be good. I haven't. I've gotten a couple of groups of four, and four is kind of that weird number where if you just drafted packs normally, like things get a little strange. So it might be like for the next time I come across cube draft with four people, it might be the right idea to break out one of the grid draft variants.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure which one is the best for four players, but it feels like yeah, it would be a good substitute for normal drafting
Mhm.
in any case.
Yeah, I really like two-player team sealed for when you have four
Okay.
players.
Okay. So
Um,
you'd be opening nine packs or 12 packs or
9. Yeah.
something, 9 packs.
Hmm.
Yeah, I imagine your decks would be pretty powerful actually.
Yeah,
With
it's pretty skill testing too,
uh-huh.
putting the decks together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I find that it gives me like I've done that a couple times with the uh, Eldrazi domain cube when we were just
Hmm.
sitting
Hmm.
around after an event or something.
Yeah.
Uh, Run a four-player team sealed, and I feel like it gives you some relatively good testing data, as long as you're not trying
Mm.
to test something that's a really niche archetype. Like if you're in your major themes of your set,
Hmm.
like Team Sealed is probably not a great way for me to test birthing pod decks. But
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
seen it
Or like
happen in Team Sealed where
okay.
one pool randomly got three birthing pods and they saw what they could do with it.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. It might be harder, like those archetypes where you need a critical mass of cards, like even the Gravecrawler archetype. It might be harder to put together, and so I don't know if your decks would still look more like generic, mishmash of good cards, like good value cards, as opposed to
Yeah.
streamlined archetypes. But when you're down to 2 or 4 players, I think no matter what format you play, it's going to end up like less of a streamlined archetype and more of a mishmash of good value cards, I would imagine.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I've just gotten lucky or unlucky, how you want to look at it. We
Hmm.
did a team sealed once where my
Hmm.
pool ended up with all the grave crawlers, all the carrion feeders, and all the blood casts. And I was
Yeah.
able to build a
Hmm.
virtually mono black deck that was splashing for like three cards.
So you guys had the Moto shuffler going on, and
Yeah, something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, but yeah,
Um,
going back to I guess designing a cube for 2 players.
I would cut out almost all the gold cards.
Yeah, like I don't know if the cube itself should be smaller. Like I don't know if you primarily expect 2 to 4 players. You might not even need 360 cards at that point because at that point that might be too big, and you might want a smaller size potentially, like 270, and then you could really.
Yeah.
Now I don't know if that would lead to a lot of repetition, but yeah, it feels like I don't know if 360 would already be too big if you're primarily designing for 2 players.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say either really cut down on your so a couple things. You might want to figure out a new idea for how to do mana fixing.
Hmm.
Uh, so mana fixing, unless it's fetch lands,
Hmm.
works pretty much. So the way that it works in Magic is that fetch lands are really analogous to hybrids in demand,
Interesting.
provided that you have access to the respective dual lands.
Okay.
And dual lands work like gold. Like
Hmm.
there's only one two
Interesting.
color combination that wants any given dual land or gold card.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's an interesting analog. Yeah. So,
and
mhm.
the percentages actually work out exactly
Okay.
that way.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I would think that if I'm running a two-player draft, I want a cube that really cuts down on these narrow demand cards because they're going to be dead mostly. Like if you think about if we're each in somehow two-color decks,
Mm.
then 8 of the guilds are just going to be dead.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's true. Yeah. No, you bring up an excellent point. I mean, gold cards are already, I don't want to say sketchy, but yeah, a lot of times gold cards table, even in 8-man, because assuming everyone is in guild, there might be some guilds that are unclaimed, and you might get Orzhov cards going around and around. And you're right, that problem just exemplifies uh, when you down to two players, and presumably each one in just two colors.
yeah. So,
Mm.
I mean, I would maybe do the lands in a separate draft for two-player,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
or do just like another idea I had is to you kind of accept that two-player drafting is going to be a little slower, so you could just pack it with Evolving Wilds and
Yep,
five-color lands,
yep, yep.
City of Brass and
Yeah.
Gemstone Mine,
Yeah,
these types of
yeah, like
things.
I'm certainly not unhappy to run like slightly weaker fixing in a two-man format because I know that again the power level of the decks won't be as high and the speed of the
Hmm.
game won't be as fast.
Yeah, so I would cut out the narrow fixing and the narrow gold cards.
Hmm.
And I also think that if you're doing two-player drafting, um, well, part
Hmm.
of it is that you're not going to see the entire cube. So one of
Yeah.
the ideas with grid drafting was to see more of the cube so that you could build on these synergies. So in a
Hmm.
standard grid draft, you see I think 162 cards,
Hmm.
even if you're only drafting like 45 to 50 each.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and where am I going with this? So you probably don't want things that are as niche that really require a lot
Right.
to come together
Yeah.
if you're designing mainly for two-player. So I think
Hmm.
you have to accept that your decks are going to be in the primary theaters of aggro mid-range
Hmm.
control,
Hmm.
and that
Hmm.
you can have kind of variance on that. Like I don't
Yep.
mind. I think Gravecrawler is a good example of an aggro deck will certainly play that, and then if it
Hmm.
happens to get some synergies in there.
Yep.
Um, but
Hmm.
yeah, you mainly in a two-player draft thing just want to cut down on the narrow effects, whether those be narrow archetype anchors that aren't often used even in an eight-player draft, narrow lands or narrow gold cards.
Hmm.
Um, and obviously sets work with no gold cards, so
Right.
if you wanted to say I'm almost always with 2 or 4 players, we're not going to have gold
Yeah.
cards. And then when it goes up to 8 players, like it's still going to be a functional
Yep.
draft set.
So you're saying like Return to Ravnica Block Cube is not the best candidate for two-player cube? Because
I
I,
don't imagine that it
yeah,
is.
I've seen some of those questions on various forums where people are trying to build super multicolor and targeting at 2 to 4 players, and yeah, I think you bring up a good point. That may not be the right cube to break out for the
Yeah,
two
well, the,
player
the real
for.
idea is that you want people competing for cards.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do that in a number of ways. You can cut out low competition cards,
Yeah.
or you can have your players be in more colors.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but in a two-player draft, let's say you're both in a three-color deck, like there's
Mm-hmm.
probably a lot of times you'll only have one overlapping color. Like if
Yeah.
I'm Naya
Right.
and you're
Right.
in Grixis, like we both kind of
Mm-hmm.
compete for red a little
Yeah.
bit, but
Yeah.
I don't think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
this sounds like it could be almost another entire article series where you expand on grid draft and talk less about maybe the actual drafting mechanics and more about the design of the cube. Because it feels like there's a lot of depth here that you could go into, and it would take a lot of experimentation to play around and figure out what actually works if you're going to, maximize or optimize your cube for 2 players.
you know, unfortunately, I've never tested it, so I'm really not
Yeah, that's
um,
fair. Yeah.
fit
Yeah.
to write about it just
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same here. I'm not in a situation where I run a lot of two-mans anymore. Although for a while, that's all I was doing with, my brother before I actually had my cube. So, yeah, so I guess if anyone, listening actually has more experience than us about this, we'd actually love to hear about that because, we don't, neither one of us, I guess, have a lot of experience right now with two-man drafting environments. So we would take somebody, with the actual capability to test it out and tell us what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, one of the byproducts of my writing for Channel Fireball is
Hmm.
that my cube has become a lot more popular.
Okay.
So we never run less than six, and we almost always have a full eight
Hmm.
man.
Oh, cool.
Um,
So the people have actually like they know about your China Fireball series and stuff like that locally.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, people
Right.
know.
Right.
Yeah, Europeans, I mean, they read Channel Fireball in Star
Hmm.
City. They don't
Okay.
really order from there, I don't think.
Yeah, I would imagine the shipping might be killer for
No,
Europe.
it's actually not.
Okay.
It's really crazy because I do my orders from there with
Yep.
store credit, and so I can see what the shipping costs are.
Yeah.
A typical order has like $5 of shipping on there.
Hmm. That's
Um,
that's entirely reasonable considering it's being shipped,
yeah, and it
across the
always
ocean.
gets there in 1 week or less. So,
Channel Fireball is quite fast, yeah, I found with their shipping times.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. All right, I'm going to move us on to the next question, and because I get to pick the questions, I'm going to pick one of mine. Um, green archetypes. What decks are possible in base green, and what decks are fun and or make for good gameplay? So I'm going to throw that one at you because I know you have got more going on in green, I think, than the typical cube designer has.
okay. So what decks are possible in base green?
Yeah, and
Uh,
I just mean like not splashing, not like red blue, splashing green, but like at least maybe 50% green is kind of what I meant by that.
yeah, I've been surprised. So I've always had my least favorite uh, color combination be green-white beatdowns.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but people have been playing it a lot lately. Um, just throwing in like Tarmogoyfs and Scavenging and Rancor and these types of things.
Hmm.
And it 3-0'd, I guess Hannes 3-0'd with it,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
not this week, but the week before.
Yeah, his deck
I
had
don't
a
think of
good
green
amount of
as a
wins.
very solid aggro color.
Right. Right.
Um,
It's definitely like either third, fourth, or fifth, depending on your cube, as far as how good aggro is. It's definitely not number one or two, I would think, and it's probably number four or five in most cubes.
I think of green uh, as the best mid-range color.
Yeah, yeah, it
I guess
definitely
I've said
takes.
the two colors are the best at mid-range. I mean, it's different styles. So red
Mhm.
is really good at keeping the board clear and
Yeah.
then marching in with its flame tongue kavru or whatever.
Hmm.
And green is really good at just like getting a Thrun on the board
Yeah.
that acts as a
Green.
moat.
Yeah, green has a lot of good beefy bodies, like between and a lot of them gain life, like between your obstinate Baloth and your Thragtusts, and if you count Huntmaster as green, a lot of these guys that clog up the ground, gain you a bit of life, and easily can
Okay,
stall
hold
for like
on. We've
for
got a
2 turns.
comment from the chat here where Dom says that he loves green aggro and it's almost at the point where red is the fourth
Red is the
best
fourth
somehow.
best. Well, Dom
What
does
is
have
going
something of
on
a
in your cube?
Dom has something of a non-traditional cube. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, so yeah, that was your article, right, Dom? The Rethinking Red
Hmm.
series. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean things can be whatever you make them out to be, which is
Hmm.
kind of why I've always been so surprised by. I mean, there have been years of complaints about people saying that black is the worst cube
Yeah,
color, and
yeah,
it's like just make it better, make the other things worse, be a
yeah.
designer, have
I know
the cojones to do
yeah,
something
it's
about it.
it's it's funny because I think just based on the results of my last half dozen drafts, I'm wondering if black is actually the best color now in my cube, and it's surprising the turnaround
I
I've
mean,
had
it's not a
with.
universal topic. Whatever color is the best in your cube is whatever's the best in your cube. Like
Yep.
anything can be it.
Hmm.
If you
Exactly.
like,
Yeah,
it's
and
like
and
saying what color is the best in draft. And you're like,
Mhm.
which set? And I'm just like, well, all sets. You know, like,
Right.
it really
Right.
depends on
Exactly.
which set you're drafting.
Yeah. Exactly.
If you're
Exactly.
talking about M14, then it's blue. If you're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about Zendikar, then it's probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. I guess that's not necessarily the most interesting discussion. I mean, uh, going back to green, I'm trying to just make it more interesting, if not more powerful, because it feels like for me, green always ends up, like you said, in that mid-range area where it's kind of and for me, I heavily support ramp. So it's either doing green mid-range kind of dorky 4/4 guys, or just ramping up to 5, 6, and 7 mana. And I'm wondering if there's more interesting archetypes out there other than those two, because those two seem to be where green is pigeonholed right now. And it's not even a power level concern that I have, but more of a, I would like to enable more interesting green decks. And I think I've kind of hit a wall on that and thought I would throw that question out there.
Well, Dom says he thinks green is the best color combo, which I don't know how that's possible because it's only a single color. Like it's not even a combination. Like
Mhm.
did you mean green something else is the best color
No, I
combo?
think he means like combos, as in, like we're
Oh,
talking about
best
split
combo
between.
color. I am reading things backwards.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess
Um,
are we talking like survival and like I again, this is where my lack of knowledge of legacy cards hurts me, but I'm sure there are a lot of good green cards in there.
all right, Dom, you're going to have to write a Rethinking Green article
Yeah,
so we
actually, yeah,
can.
I would like to read that because then I would be able to maybe do something with my green section, and I guess I have thought about your revamp of throwing in the birthing pods because that's fundamentally a green archetype, and that would maybe enable
Yeah.
some more interesting
I mean,
things to
playing
happen
Birthing
there.
Pod without green is kind of a suicide.
Oh yeah,
Which
yeah, yeah,
you're gonna do so much damage.
yep, yep. And I don't know. The other thing I've thought about is maybe making Green Ramp more about the Eldrazi spawn because again that was a really fun thing to do in Rise of Eldrazi, and it seems like you've been able to build an entire cube around the concept of Eldrazi spawn. And so I'm wondering if I want to dial back on like Search for Tomorrow, and Explore and Farseek, and go more on like Nest Invaders and what's the other one? Kozilek's Predator, and make Ramp more about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would have the power level to compete with the other archetypes, but that's
Mm.
something I'm thinking about to make Ramp more interesting. Okay, so
So Dom
Dom
mentions
has.
Fast Bond here, which is
Mhm.
a card that I used to run, and there was the only green white deck that I really liked was like a green white Fast Bond aggro that would play it would play Crucible of Worlds and Mox
Mm,
Diamond
okay.
and Step Links and the Dredge card and Fast Bond
Hmm. Hmm.
and maybe like a Wasteland or two.
Yeah, yeah,
And
like
like there was
strip
this whole like
mine.
land tax, like a lot of these cards that aren't in my cube anymore, but
Hmm.
it was just capable of doing really
Hmm.
crazy things and
Okay. Yeah.
generating infinite mana or weird
Right.
things and also beating down at the same time.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know, I really like Mox Diamond is one of my favorite cards. There's a lot of
Yep.
synergies with it. You know,
Hmm.
Mox
Yeah.
Diamond turn one, Life in Alone is not
Yes.
a bad way
Yes.
to start.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting because I guess going back to the whole modern thing, yeah, Light from the Loam doesn't do as much work here as it does. I would expect in traditional cubes,
Okay,
and
so you are making me look this up. Holistic wisdom. I didn't realize there was a magic card. I thought it was just a magic article series.
turn every land strip mine. Yeah, I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't know half of the cards that Dom just listed here.
Okay.
So what does this do? And exile a card from your hand. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand if it shares a card type with a card exile. And this came with an Odyssey.
So this is like
I
a mana
Mhm.
intensive strip lock. Yeah,
Right.
I mean this type of stuff is part of the reason why I replaced strip mine with
Yep.
wasteland in my
Yep.
cube.
Yep. Yep.
Well,
Mm.
I run four wastelands for those of you who don't know
Mm-hmm.
to get that kind
Mm-hmm.
of legacy thing going, and I love it. I
Yeah.
I love being wastelanded even. Um, I
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
say that
I.
my most fun Magic game ever started with me getting wastelanded on turns one and two and dazed on turn three, and
Mm.
somehow fought through that to win.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I lose a lot more games to Stone Rain and to one Wooly Acid Moss than I've won with them, and I'm perfectly happy to lose to those cards because, yeah, that's probably a case where I got too greedy with my mana base, and the opponent was able to take advantage of that. And
mm,
yeah, I'm perfectly happy to have some land destruction in there, and then to subsequently to lose to it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, tortured existence is pretty awesome. For those of you who don't know, I've been actually thinking about seeing if it can work in my main cube because I've played this card in Pauper before. So
Hmm.
basically, what you do is that you discard a card from your hand and you return target creature from your graveyard to your hand.
Hmm.
So this works really well with just like getting back the creatures that you need. Um,
Hmm.
you know,
Yep.
you can lock them out of creatures with like the evoke. What is it? Bone splitter, bone shredder.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It works well with dredge in that you fill up your graveyard and you because normally like with dredge like you dredge with loam and
Hmm.
um, you either have like reanimator which goes with that and is really broken somehow or you
Hmm.
just keep getting lands back which is good but eventually stops being good.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and tortured existence is a good way to get around that. I don't know that you need to, you know, the pauper deck I play with it has madness and other effects going on.
Sure, sure.
Um, I actually
Yeah.
built a deck once around this with, so there's uh, this cycle of Eidolon cards, and
Oh
you,
my God.
whenever you
I
play a
don't.
multicolored spell,
Again,
you
I
get
I,
them
I
from your
thought I don't.
graveyard to your hand, and then it would just keep getting putrid leech. So you would discard those, get back putrid leech, and then you would play this, and those would all go to your hand, and then you could keep discarding them with tortured existence. Um,
Again, I'm gonna say I thought Eidolon was just a username. I had no idea it was an actual cycle of cards from a
yeah,
recent set, no less.
yeah.
Oh man.
So I mean, there's a lot of just to go all popper on you guys. There's like
Hmm.
Grave Scrabbler. Is that not here? Yeah, Grave Scrabbler.
Hmm.
Uh, with tortured existence. So you discard it, you pay the madness cost, and
Yep.
you return a creature from the graveyard to your hand.
Yeah, and this is interesting. I think this goes to show that the more formats that people play, like whether they be, EDH or Pauper or Legacy or what have you, it's like you know and you have knowledge of more of these interactions that people would not get just from, Scour and Gather, which is the primary way of how I discover new cards. But yeah,
Yeah.
I guess having, a good deep knowledge of other various formats, it really can help contribute to good cube design just from getting additional ideas.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing a cube built around, and maybe even you could do multiples of tortured existence, because
Hmm.
it's like with all build arounds that if you only have one of them, then it's usually not actually worth building around.
Right. Okay.
Like it's
So
not worth
just yeah.
taking abnormal picks to make that card better. But if you
Yep.
have like say three birthing pods or you have a
Yeah.
few grave crawlers, then maybe you take some weird zombie that turns
Hmm.
it on.
Hmm. Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah. I've had Dreadscape Zombie in my queue for a while for Gravecrawler. I don't know if it was good enough, so I took it out. But it's one of those that is not the worst if somehow you can bin it, then just unearth it later on,
Well,
get
if
all
you
your
want to
tokens back.
build more things around it, birthing pod works great with this.
Yeah.
You know, like you
Yeah. Yeah.
sack it and then you unearth it and sack it for something else.
Yeah, so
Um,
I guess yeah, anything with value, anything with unearth or persist or undying, just becomes. I mean, they're already all quite good, and they become infinitely better with a couple of birthing pods lying around.
yeah, that deck also ran Wild Mongrel, and there's a card that seems like it should be good, but is not. It's like Vampire Hound, I think, is another discard outlet. Um, it's like a gray ogre that can discard something to get +2/+2.
Creature card. Okay. Yeah.
Um, and the problem is that 3 mana for this type of effect
Yeah.
is just like
Right.
infinitely more than 2 mana.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
Wild
It's
Mongrel can work and you can get value out of it, and then this like it comes down later. You have less in your
yeah.
hand when it comes down.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of found the same thing. Like I threw in Bloodthrone Vampire into my cube in our last draft, and it was surprisingly excellent. Whereas something like Nantuko Husk, which is the equivalent of this card, except you sack a creature, Nantuko Husk would have been entirely too slow at 3 mana. So and the +1/+1 bonus would not have mattered very much. So yeah, I think you're right. For these kind of enabler cards, you really want them at 1 and 2 mana, and 3 is just entirely too much to get your engine going.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
so if anybody is looking for ideas for a new cube, you can take insight from
yeah.
our tangent here.
Mhm. All right. I think I've probably got about 10 more minutes, so I'm gonna pluck one more question from our
We
list of
had a question
topics.
from the chat here.
Okay, cool.
Someone said, "Have we seen MTG bot cube drafting?"
Uh-huh. I'm afraid I don't actually know what that is. The
No, I am out of the loop on this.
MTG bot cube drafting. Okay, so is this a new tool that the ultimate Twitch TV bot? I see. It's
Six
cube
cube.
draft for Moto.
Okay. You send your cards to MTG bot,
So this must be a new thing, right? This must have
and
it
then it
drafts
like
them.
distributes them. Okay.
Oh, okay. So you trade your cards to this MTG bot, and then
Interesting. Yeah, so the big problem with doing moto drafts has always been that it takes
mhm,
forever to distribute and get things
right,
going.
right, right. And
Um,
this is if tapped out does not crash on you or do something really weird and pick your cards for you. Um,
yeah, tapped out is super buggy.
it used to be better, right? It's gotten worse, I think,
Yeah,
as I've gotten
I can
older.
never finish a multiplayer draft on that site. Like it always drops me between packs or something.
Yeah, I used to be able to, and in the last year, I don't think I've been able to. Um,
You know. Yeah,
and and so.
this is a really cool idea.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm. Yeah, and I think to address the question about Wizards' previous legal action. I assume you mean them shutting down other. Is it Cockatrice that they've shut down recently?
but
Again,
this
I don't
actually
remember.
goes through MTGO.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. I guess so. It's not a replacement program for MTGO, but I guess it would let you do the drafting portion and then simply hand out the cards for you, and then you would go and play those matches out on MTGO.
it takes money away from them. Uh, yeah, I mean, kind of.
Right, right.
Like
I
if
imagine.
I were to want to do this, I would need to sink money into the moto economy to get it going that I
Yeah,
wouldn't
the cards.
otherwise
Yeah.
do. Um,
I,
well,
I mean,
the different, I mean, it's not that they're going to see it this way, but currently I spend $0 per year on moto cube drafting. Um, because I find that cube really bad. Like I get my fill of it by watching a Channel Fireball video every now and then and just being like, oh, I hate this cube, and then closing it
mhm.
after like game one, um,
Yeah.
or maybe even during pack one, depending on what the person is drafting.
Mhm.
Uh, but I could see doing this. You know, this would be a really interesting thing for our website. Uh, you know,
Mhm.
part of the problem with Uh, so traditionally, cubing has been seen as it's been approached kind of like a science, in that
Mhm.
they're looking for the most powerful cards at each
Mhm.
slot,
Mhm.
which is actually really conducive to forum discussion because
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
can debate
If
on that.
exactly. If
And
there's an empirical
it's
formula you can drill it down to, then and everyone can agree on that, then I guess there's, like you can achieve common consensus because there's only one right answer.
Yeah, and it also gets around the playtesting bottleneck pretty well because
Yeah.
I mean, you can theory
Yep.
craft pretty
Yep.
well to find out which cards are best or not. And even if
Yep.
you're off by a little bit, it's probably
Hmm.
not going to
Yep.
affect the power level of your cube too much. But
Hmm.
like, if I'm going to talk about the thing from earlier, like if I wanted to get say like a 1 or 2 toughness matters theme into a cube, like
Hmm.
that's just gonna take forever. A to like come up with the initial design and do something
Hmm.
sensible with that, and
Yep.
then B, like you still have to play test it a lot to see if it's working as you intend.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, and that's certainly a tough part. I mean, for Wizards' actual sets, they have a whole team of designers and then a whole team of developers working full time for presumably anywhere from 2 to 4 months working
yeah,
on a set,
they
and
say
then
that they like draft the set every day
yeah,
with
yeah, and
actual
here
designers.
exactly, and you've got multiple professional designers doing this, and typically we have ourselves as amateur cube designers and zero play testers typically, other than those who might come out to our cube drafts every now and then, and so that's certainly a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like if I move to Toronto or if you move to Antwerp, I feel like
Yeah,
we could work together and probably
yep,
build something that's
yep,
better designed than either of our individual cubes.
hmm yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
like I know I'm aware of things that I would like to do um, better in my Eldrazi cube, but it's difficult. You
hmm
know, design is
yep,
hard. It's time
yeah,
intensive. Don't let
yeah,
anyone
yeah,
tell you
yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely have a greater appreciation now for what Wizards does, and they certainly just don't play games all day and then get paid, obscene amounts of money to do so. Yeah, it certainly is real work and does take real talent to do.
Yeah, but this would be interesting. I don't play a lot of Moto
Mhm.
right now, and if we had, what I was trying to say is that like we'd have some common activity. Like right now
Mhm.
like I'm not super invested in the contents of your cube because I'm never going to play it, right? But
Mhm.
if we had my
Right.
cube or something on
Mhm.
Moto and we actually drafted it without it being a huge pain in the butt, then
Mhm.
that,
We could play
it'd
on.
be a fun
Yeah.
way to spend an afternoon with the people from
Yeah,
our
for sure.
community.
Yes. Yes.
Speaking of our community, last week, when we
Uh-huh.
recorded this 1 week ago, said that there
Mhm.
were 70 members. So we're up to 78 now. So
Huh.
we had 8 people register over the course of a
Yeah.
week. We're still a small site, but that type
Right.
of thing
That's like yeah.
makes me really happy.
That's like a 10% growth, and you did not even have a written article on Channel Fireball this week, and that's
Well, I
usually where we
did
get the
write one.
spikes.
I don't know when it's going online.
Okay.
I emailed it on like Monday or Tuesday, and
hmm
I thought
hmm
it was on a Thursday calendar, but maybe I got bumped again.
No. Mm-hmm.
I don't always know before I see it on the website when it's going to go online.
Right, right. So you're
Um,
just hitting refresh the same as everyone else at midnight.
well, I'm not really awake at midnight.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess it'd be midnight our time and yeah, 6 a.m. your time, something like that.
Well, I don't know
Um.
exactly. Maybe it's midnight West Coast time. I don't know.
Oh, it
I
might
check it
be.
at
It
some
might be.
point. I mean,
That's.
they only post articles once a day. So as soon as
Mhm,
I've seen the new articles online,
mhm.
it's not like they
Yeah,
post one and then a few hours later post another.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think Dom has a good point about building like a budget cube on MTGO, and I think one of our forum members, Tom, already actually has that going, and he's run
Yeah,
it before,
I'm actually
and that
designing a budget cube,
yeah,
kind
I
of.
was going to say that ties into your, design of your third cube, which I don't know how far you've gotten with that, but it seems like this would be an excellent way to play test that cube if you don't have the manpower to do that in person between your normal cube and your Eldrazi cube. We could certainly employ, us in the forums to go about doing that.
Yeah, that would be the idea. I mean, this cube is not.
hmm
I was trying to get like what would be the paper price of it, and I
Yep.
have,
Yep.
it's really not there at the moment. I've
Uh-huh.
got a page on various themes and things, but it's really in the early design stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's totally fair. Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes just designing cubes as a paper exercise can be a fun thing to do, even if you never actually go out and acquire the cards and play test it.
Yeah.
But this is when I think all of us would have some interest in playing, if this were to come together.
The nice thing about Moto is that, like if you buy from MTGO traders, is that the
Yep.
cheap cards there will actually be like 2 and 4 cents,
Okay.
whereas from a paper
Yeah. Yeah.
seller, you
Yeah.
get a floor of, sometimes there's
hmm
like a 10-cent card, but most
10
of them are
cents,
25
like
cents.
25.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So on MTGO, this would probably this could all be had for a song, I would think. Like probably maybe less than 50 tickets total, potentially.
yeah, I think
hmm
you could probably do
hmm
it for like 30 tickets.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it may
I
be
think we might be.
worth getting back on.
Yep.
My
hmm
magic time is spread pretty thin at the moment between maintaining 2 cubes and producing content and running a website and
Yep.
trying to get into modern.
Uh-huh.
But so this is on the back burner right now. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if anyone wants to work with me on it or
Exactly. Yeah,
uh,
I
put it
think this
together
could
for
definitely
Magic Online.
yeah, this could definitely be a collaborative exercise. I think back when you were posting suggestions, there was a lot of input from other people. So I don't think this has to be a solo effort on your part. I think we could all have something to pitch in and contribute towards for the initial list anyway.
I'd have more time, but no, but that would be additional drafting. Uh, yeah, I mean,
And
I really like the social aspect of paper drafting.
mhm,
I like
mhm.
hauling my cube out to the local store and
Yep.
sharing that experience with friends and new people I haven't met yet, and that type
Mhm,
of thing.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Drinking. So our store has it's like a cyber cafe where there's computers there and lots of tables and a bar, and so there's lots of it's nice to have beer in public while cube drafting
Mhm.
and that type of thing. It's a fun night that I would not want to replace by sitting at home on my
Yeah.
computer.
Well, I guess the other difficulty is we are, I think, all spread across different time zones, and I know like you and Dom are in Europe, a bunch of us are on the East Coast, and I think a bunch of us on the West Coast. So it would take a lot of coordination, and it might be a weekly or probably less than weekly thing if we were to try and all get together for three
Yeah.
consecutive hours. I guess it would have to be a weekend, by necessity
Yeah,
to
but if
be able to
we,
do that.
I mean, I know there are people watching this who are not members of the forum, so sign up.
Mhm.
The more we have, the more we can easily put together this type of thing. I know that
Mhm.
Marshall Sutcliffe, his
Okay.
limited resources clan, they have a cube that they draft,
Okay.
um, this
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, this is
and
something we should definitely think about because I this could be a fun thing that brings a bunch of our community members together and turns it from like theoretical theory crafting into actual cube design and gameplay, which would be a lot of fun, I think.
yeah. So thank you, TriTalk,
Yeah.
for putting this out to us. I had not
Yeah.
encountered this before,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I'll
Yeah.
definitely look
I
into
know.
it.
Yeah, I know there's another one I think Tom suggested, or someone else, maybe not Tom, but it was like giraffe.in, but I guess that doesn't tie into MTGO in any way. So this would be
Mm-mm.
nice if it could trade the cards for you, which would be, I guess, again, that's one of the bottlenecks.
So TriTalk, have you used this? What's the like turnaround time between drafting and uh, getting your decks put together?
Be be funny if this were just a bot that put itself up out there and gained people's trust and then eventually stole all your cards at some point and never returned
Yeah,
them.
I mean, another reason to do it as a budget thing.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That'd be a lot of like developer time just to take some modal cards. There's
Yeah.
probably better uses of your time, especially if you're someone skilled enough to put that together.
Yeah.
But you never know.
So our cards are sick.
There have been bigger scams in the world. So,
Yeah. Cool, cool. All right, I think I'm gonna call it here. I'm probably off to do some mundane house chores. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining again. I think we had a slightly bigger turnout this time,
hmm
and apologize for all my technical difficulties on my end. It's a little frustrating, but I'm gonna figure it out eventually. I'm gonna figure out a good setup one of these days for one of our future casts.
hmm
So, all right, you can keep the stream going, but I'm gonna sign off. So see you guys later.
No, I got home and have dinner now. It's
Oh
almost
yeah,
seven
you're not even
o'clock
home.
here. Yeah,
Yeah, your wife's wondering what you're doing. She can just tune into the
we're
Twitch and see
having we're
that you're
having
streaming.
mussels tonight,
Okay.
so it's a very Antwerp thing.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
mussels and French fries. Well, Belgian
Wow.
fries.
That actually sounds awesome.
It is awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm
So,
gonna see if I can try and scrounge that up at home, but that seems unlikely over here.
yeah. All right.
All right.
Well,
Yep.
thank you all for tuning in.
Yep. And we'll do this again soon. All right. See. Bye, everybody.